Peter Pitts, who's going to join us live. Peter, we've talked to you about vaccine for weeks now. What does this move in the UK mean, both symbolically and physically, in our fight against COVID-19?
This is a very exciting moment. You know, the UK is the first country to allow a clinically proven vaccine to be used in its country on the general public outside of clinical trials. As you mentioned, their first tranche of 800,000 doses, which is really 400,000 because the vaccine has two inoculations. So they can initially inoculate 400,000 people. They're prioritizing elderly in senior centers and their caregivers, as well as people over 80 and their caregivers and healthcare workers. And since this vaccine, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, has to be refrigerated at 70 degrees centigrade, which is about negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll probably be given initially to National Health Service workers in hospitals. So again, the healthcare workers being essential as well. It's very exciting. They're also going to buy an additional 40 million doses. The U.S. government has bought an initial tranche of 100 million doses with an additional 500 million doses on order. So the FDA is holding a hearing on the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine on the 10th. I believe that they will authorize emergency use authorization. The week after that, the Moderna vaccine will also have a FDA hearing. I also think that they'll get an emergency use authorization. So before Christmas, we should have hundreds of millions of doses ready to go in the U.S. to start inoculating our own priority audiences. Very exciting, very good news.
So, Peter, you don't think you're going to see much happening with the FDA or the U.S. officials approving a vaccine before the 10th? Do you think that's going to be kind of a hard deadline before we move forward?
Oh, definitely. I think it's very smart that the FDA has asked its advisory committee of outside experts to weigh in on their decision because, one, it's good science, and we have to follow the science. And the more smart people you can get thinking about this, the better for later on. And secondly, and really equally, if not more important, it's going to help instill faith in the American public that the FDA is following the science, that this is a science-based proposition, that politics has nothing to do with it, that the vaccine is safe and effective, because what we really want to accomplish as quickly as possible is to reach a 60% inoculation rate in this country, because at that point, you begin to talk about herd immunity, and that's where you really move from mitigating the virus to containing it, which means that we're winning. So what we need now, that we're actually going to start putting needles in people's arms, start jabbing people, as they say in the UK, is to really start educating the American public as to the value and importance, safety, and efficacy of vaccines.
And how do you strike the right balance between speed, safety, and effectiveness with authorizations like this?
That's a really good question. The whole concept of Operation Warp Speed was not to rush, but to expedite. Because when you rush, you cut corners, you make mistakes, and that's clearly completely unacceptable. When you expedite, you take all the time, talent, and treasure of the healthcare ecosystem and put it against a single task, that being of developing a vaccine, manufacturing it, and getting it out through smart logistics to the general public. I think that's the message that we've got to send to communities of color who have traditionally been suspicious of government healthcare programs and are also at higher risks of infection. So you don't want the communities that have higher infection rates to be negative towards a vaccine. Then you've got the general population that says, well, maybe I should wait and see what happens. I don't want to be first. But the issue of vaccinations, it's not a race of a single individual. It's a relay race. And now the baton has been passed to us to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. And if the person in front of you who's passing you the baton is slowing things down, everything's going to slow down. We have to work on this as a team.
How many dosages do we need here in the United States to reach that 60%? And how long do you think before we hit that point?
Well, we've bought 600 million doses from Pfizer and BioNTech, and that goes quite a long way. So 600 million doses gives you enough to vaccinate 300 million people, because, again, you need to get a second vaccination 3 weeks after the first. But we're also purchasing vaccinations from other companies, Moderna and others, as they come online. So we should have enough, by mid-year to vaccinate the entire population. So I certainly hope that by the middle of next year, we should have almost everybody who wants to get vaccinated. And that's a huge plus, because the Pfizer vaccine only took 10 months from conception to approval. And that's astounding. And we did it right. We followed the science. We changed the technologies of vaccines forever. The new types of vaccines are less expensive. They're safer. They're quicker to manufacture, and we can scale them up globally more quickly. So we're really about to get into the driver's seat relative to battling COVID-19 finally. And I'm glad that we're there, and I think it's a good Christmas present for everybody.
It certainly is. And Peter, would you mind breaking down the differences in the vaccines that are showing effectiveness? We've got the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, et cetera.
Well, right now, the two vaccines that we know the most about are the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. Those are both mRNA vaccines, messenger RNA. And this is a new type of technology. Basically, rather than injecting the body with dead or partially live virus, which can be a safety issue, it basically sends messenger RNA into your body to tell your immune system what type of antigens to produce. It's new types of technology. It's been on the kind of research drawing board for about 5 or 10 years, but we've really learned a lot about the science, how to make it work. And one of the great things, besides its 95% effectiveness rate, which is really astounding, is that it's safe and easy and inexpensive to manufacture. There will be other vaccines coming online. You mentioned the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, other companies are working on similar types of programs. They'll all be different. And I hope that each of these vaccines will have data that will show us which will be more effective for, say, an older population or for children or for people with pre-existing conditions. So it isn't an embarrassment of riches, it's just riches. And we need as many vaccines as we can get from a volumetric perspective, certainly, but also from the ability to understand which vaccines might be best for individual subpopulations.
And Peter, just before I let you go, I am curious, with the UK approving kind of this their own emergency youth authorization, is that going to affect the dosages that we see available for other countries?
You know, the issue of access is very important. Obviously, you know, a lot of Western and more developed countries bought vaccines early. I think each of these companies has said they're going to do what's called differential pricing. So they're going to allow countries that have fewer financial resources to buy the vaccines at lower price. So it's an issue both of access, pardon me, as well as points of access. And as we begin to understand as we begin to understand the refrigeration technologies, I believe that the entire world will have these vaccines in short order, safely and effectively.
Peter, we appreciate you joining us here on NBCLX with all your insight.
My pleasure. Be safe.